as a category emerged. Race is therefore grounded in blackness and whiteness. Racism, the ideology of race, is grounded in the notion of black inferiority and white superiority. And that inferiority and superiority is grounded in natural law, in natural existence. That is, race assumes that those with black skin are naturally inferior, and those with white skins are naturally superior. That's where it's grounded. You want to be very, very clear about that. It is not as a race you become superior when you are on earth, or you become inferior when you are on earth, or you're born inferior and you're born superior. That's where race comes from. Now, I started by saying we in Guyana, we are ethnic groups with not a history of racial antagonism. We don't have that history of racial antagonism. We do not. And so, therefore, we start off as ethnic groups. However, given the way in which our society has developed in Guyana, we practice our ethnicity as race. And it's like, if we go around Guyana, people don't say ethnicity and so forth, they say race. Because we practice our ethnic differences. We have turned our ethnic differences into a racial relationship with each other. And so therefore the notion of inferiority and superiority, which undergirds race, now undergirds our ethnicity. And making this point because there are some idiots in Guyana who accuse us of fetching American concept into Guyana. Race is not an American concept, although race emerged first in America. Race is a universal concept, a universal notion. It can be lifted from one place to another. And so, although we are different based on ethnicity, we practice our ethnicity as race. And we're not borrowing that from anybody. That is what as a race. So therefore, if the binary of race starts off as black and white, other groups have to fit in what we call the color code. It is natural for groups to gravitate to that which they perceive as privilege. So other ethnic groups, when they engage race, they gravitate away from blackness and towards whiteness. And in the process of doing that, they develop anti-black, first as prejudice, because race starts as prejudice. They develop anti-black prejudices as they try to run away from blackness toward whiteness on the color. And over time, when those ethnic groups find themselves in positions of power, as they compete with the Africans for political power and cultural power and economic power, they do so within the context of entitlement. That is, that we are not black. And so therefore, we are endowed by God to govern. And our black brothers and sisters, having been born inferior, are therefore not endowed with what it takes to govern. So when we look at a place like Guyana, we conceive of our politics, our economics, and our culture within the context of black inferiority, which of course we borrow, if you will, or we became Guyana and we look at the relationship between blacks and whites, and we gravitate towards whiteness and away from blackness. And so therefore we conceive of our place in the Guyanese society as anti-black. Anti-blackness, therefore, is the core of our evolution as a society. Is at the core. It is often not as explicit because we tend to hide behind ethnicity, when in fact what we're doing is practicing race. And so, therefore, as our politics have evolved and we get to the point of independence, the question arose, who governs when the colonials leave? Who governs? Who governs politically? Who governs culturally? Who governs economically? And if the underlying notion is that blackness is not equipped to govern because they cannot exist in a state of freedom if you're a slave. The notion is that you cannot exist in a state of freedom. And so therefore you have to be governed. You don't have the tools to govern. You don't have the mental capacity to govern. As descendants of slaves, you are emotional. You are not rational. You are not rational, and so therefore you cannot govern. And as our independence has evolved, that notion of what blackness represents has become more and more manifest. To the point where we use codes. The old term rigging. Now we know in elections in Guyana and other parts of the world, rigging is commonplace. All parties rig election. I can think of no election in Guyana that has not been rigged. I'm on record as saying that whoever wins an election in Guyana happens to outrig the other side. That's fact. You start by rigging an election with the registration in the voters list. Then you rig on election day. Happy hour. Little Indian girl in Boston, at 5 o'clock she's gone. Happy hour. Little black girl in Enmore Enterprise at 5 o'clock. Happy hour. She's gone. Elections are by their nature rigged. However, the tag of riggers has stuck to the Black Party and by extension Black people. That is by no accident. Even though the other side rigs, the tag of rigging has stuck to the tag of ethnicity. Any accident? No. Because those people, as one PPP leader says, when Indians vote for the PPP, they do so because the PPP is a working class party that governs in their interest. They are therefore making a rational decision to vote for their ethnic party. But when blacks vote for the PNC, they're doing so because they're fooled by the PNC. And so therefore, their decision to vote for the PNC is not a rational one, it's an emotional one. And this is from a PPP leader who was president. Except when my president said I went crazy. But that is the belief. And whether he is saying so intentionally to mean that one side is rational and one side is non-rational, one side is superior and the other side is inferior. Whether he sets out to do that, that is what he ends up saying. We are rich because we save, but because we don't spend money on partying. We are rational. You are not rich because you don't save and you don't spend money on the right things. You are not rational. We know that they get black people who save them miserly. So saving is not driven by your ethnicity or your race, yet we have made saving a racial value that one group has and the other one does not. You look around Guyana now, who can party more than East Indians? Who can wind up and carry on more bad than East Indians is now in our faces. Yet the party tag is given to black people and not to Indian people. Partying, as we know, is a function of economics. The more money you get, the more you sport. But in Guyana, we make partying a function of race. And we do those things in order to make it very clear about who is superior and who is inferior. Have we noticed that in the last couple of months, 3 Indian males connected to power have been in our faces? And these are young males, I guess in their 30s, and whatever they are, they're not old Indian males. So they're supposed to be enlightened. They all went to university, I assume. The first one said, black people have no role models. That is consistent with the notion of blackness. If you are inferior, if you are less than human beings, role models doesn't apply to you. And so therefore, it is incumbent on the superior race to create models for you. What we call in race studies the white man's burden. In Guyana, we call it the Indian man's burden. It is the burden of the Indian man, the Indian elite, to provide role models for these half-human, half-child, half-animals. The white man's burden comes toward Guyana. And we had another one in Parliament telling women about dildos. And then we have this one allegedly spitting on a black woman, calling her monkey, and telling her about you all black people, and so on and so forth. What is constant in all 3 of those examples is the notion of power. Human beings behave in certain ways based on whether they think that they will be sanctioned. All 3 of those men belong to the Indian elite. And their perception of power says to them that I can do and say what I like, where I like, because the authorities, the system will not sanction me. They're black elites. They're black lawyers. They're black politicians. None of them would dare go to an Indian young woman and tell her what that man told that black woman. None of them would dare spit in the face of an Indian woman. None of them would dare call an Indian woman monkey. Why? Because they know if they do that, the system will in the next hour sanction them in the most extreme way. So there is a deterrence. But in the Indian elite side, there is no deterrence. because there is the perception that power lies in the Indian hands. And so therefore, our prejudices will become normative, and the police or no one will come after us. It is not surprising, therefore, that a week, 2 weeks after that incident, the police has nothing against Nirvan Singh. Because the police understands where power lies. The police is supposed to be neutral only in a society in which their neutrality exists. Neutrality does not exist in Guyana, and our institutions are not neutral. All our institutions are partisan. And so therefore, if you are in the police leadership, you know what time of day it is. And you know that it is easier to sanction blacks than to sanction Indians. You understand how the society reacts to blacks. If you charge a black man with any crime, the society assumes that that black man has committed the crime, is guilty. If you charge an Indian with the crime, society is less likely to believe that an Indian man, that Indian elite man, is guilty. Anti-black racism is really bad. We have not been able to bring anti-black racism before, partly because of Indian hypocrisy, because the Indian opinion shapers that play with race. If the price of flour goes up under a black government, they charge that black government with racism. If the price of flour goes up as it has under an Indian government, they blame it on the war that's going on in the Ukraine. When the price of flour went up in the 80s, because of the squeeze on the Guyanese economy, they didn't see that economics. They saw it as Burnham being racist against India. The price of flour goes up. Hey, they said, it has nothing to do with the government, it has to do with the war. Damn culprits. That's what they are. But they get away with it. They get away with it because black people are cowards when it comes to race. First of all, we have an identity problem. I am not black, I am Guyanese. I've never heard that anywhere in the world as often as I hear it in Guyana. In the water we drink. You are black and the Guyanese. But you make a distinction. I'm not black, I'm Guyanese. It is the most stupid statement that any ethnic group in conflict and competition with another ethnic group can make. This is to deny your fundamental identity. Black people do it up and down the ladder. Up and down the ladder. And when we deny our identity, we allow other people to define us. Because we are not defining ourselves. And even when we acknowledge our race, we are quickly to say our suffering is not unique to our identity and circumstances. Indian people suffer too. Well, of course, Indian people suffer too, and Amerindian people suffer too, but black people, given our historical evolution, given that we are the only ethnic group that was enslaved, chattel slavery, we experience the same suffering, but we experience it differently. The black people have not come to grips with that. So, The more we deny our identity, the more we deny that we are beaten up by others because of our race, the more we allow ourselves to be beaten. We are equally responsible for what happened to that young woman. We black people are equally responsible for what happened to that young woman because we are cowards when it comes to this. What's wrong with David Hinds? I will hear probably on this chat right now. Everything is race. What's wrong with him? Why can't he talk about Jack Dio and finale and so on? As if what Jack Dio and finale has nothing to do with race. That's what they want us to talk about. And so here we are in the Guyana, in which black people encourage beating up on themselves. Racism has to do with power, whether it's actual power or the perception of power. If you're Indian, you may not have economic power. You're a poor worker. You're a poor fisherman. What you do have is the perception of power because the elite of your group has power. But you have the perception of power, even if that reality of power doesn't exist. It's not rich Indian men who tell black people they're lazy, that's why they're not rich. It's poor Indian men and women who tell black people you're not rich because you're lazy. We black people lost our sense of power. We've gotten off an office. We want our party to win an election, and then we leave it like that. The party knows that. The party gets office and often doesn't have any power. That is why the party leaves power or being kicked out of power, and then we and the African people are powerless. Because we have not socialized our black leaders to use government as a form of empowerment and power. Indians, on the other hand, they push their party that when you are in government, you have to look after the empowerment of us. And therefore, power becomes important. We black people have ceded the notion of power, economic power, political power, and cultural power. What do I mean by cultural power? Whose symbols are the national symbols? Whose holidays are the national holidays? That's power. Whose music is being played on the radio? And what is it being played for? We created calypso, we created reggae. One of the functions of our Caribbean music is entertainment. There's several other functions. Affirmation of identity, historical memory, political expression, chronicle of events, social rebuke. Those are all functions of our music. But if you turn on our radio to hear those little boys and now increasing yours, cutting a set of nonsense, they play one kind of soca and one kind of reggae, dancehall slaps. And there are 6 and 7 other subgenres that you will never hear them play. Have you ever heard any DJ play Sparrow's I Am a Slave? Or Sparrow's Dawn is a Man on the Van? That's an Caribbean Man? Or singing Sandra, Die With My Dignity? Have you ever heard that? No. They play so they've reduced black culture to entertainment, not just for young black people, but for others who see us as inferior. As we once again have to discuss race and discuss racism against a young black person, I want us to grapple with what I have been trying to say in the last couple of weeks. When we talk race, we talk nonsense. Because we talk on the surface. Because we are reactive. You all kick people like me under the bus. Because you all don't want to hear intelligent discourse about race. But we got to change. We've got to change. Power today in Guyana means everything. Power means everything. Economic power, political power, cultural power. It means everything. Without power, whether we are in office or not in office, once we don't have power, we're in trouble. Black power, which in essence means the right of black people to share the power of their country, have access to that power. And black power has to be on the oil rigs. It has to be in every barrel of oil that leave our shores. A black power has to be in the business sector. What business do we black people have with local content? What business we have with local content? Local content means content to protect Indian and Portuguese capital. Local content has nothing to do with black people because we own less than 10% of that economy that we're fighting for local content. Every day about local content. Our business has to be about transferring cash from the oil to us. That's our local content. Yet we get off and talk about local content. And local content means benefit for Indian and Portuguese. But man, know thyself. You all didn't send people like me to school to come back and just give you all what the oppressors want you all to know. Local content got nothing to do with black people in Guyana. Get it out of your thoughts. What it has to do with, as far as the oil is concerned, is that whatever money they get has to go into your pockets too. That's of it. Contract. Contract. Let those who are fighting to change the contract fight to change it. Because the more money that comes with those contracts goes into the hands of Portuguese and Indian elite. Let them fight for contract. You fight for cash money in your pocket. Your priority is right, not people. the priorities right. The interview tonight is with the men that they call the bad boys. And I noticed they say all over the world, Dr. Hinds is a professor, he knows better. But he hangs out with bad boys and he brings them on the show. And he agrees with what they say. If other people can own their bad boys and turn their bad boys into saints, I'm going to hold and claim the people you call bad boys on my side and turn them into saints. Because they are all saints. They're your bad boys. They're all saints. So I've got the bad boys tonight. All four of them. And they're going to be talking about this issue of anti-Black racism. And if we have time, we're going to be talking about the notion of using Black against Black in order to dodge the issue of racism. We're not racist. Look, Black man we have appointed us. Look, is a Black man we have appointed to the Natural Resource Fund. How can we be racist? There are Black people who are more white, who are more anti-Black than other people. A long time. And so now I'm talking about Black skins, white masks. And we have them in Guyana, and we are not going to be fooled by your use of Black mannequins, because that's what they are. Black mannequins. You use them to put in the storefront to say Black people come in and buy my product. Look, I have Black mannequins. That's what they are, mannequins. I'm going to take a short break now, and I'm going to ask you all to ponder what I have introduced here as we listen to women who are about to take the power of the woman. We're not just enough to be spat upon and to call monkeys, we are not. But we allow that because we ignore power. Here are two of my sisters who have a sense of power. You take a short break and then we come back.
It is time for change at the Guyana Teachers Union, and two candidates, Vanessa Kissoon and Coretta McDonald, are running for president and general secretary respectively. Listen as they tell us why teachers across the country should vote for them in the election.
You're running for president of the Guyana Teachers Union. Why are you running?
I believe that it is time that the Guyana Teachers Union and teachers get the type of representation that they deserve. I believe that it is time that teachers be respected. And I honestly believe, Dr. Hinds, that I am the person to take the Guyana Teachers Union and the teachers of this beloved country forward and into the future.
What have you learned about your stint as General Secretary that makes you want to continue?
Coretta McDonald is a part of a team, and I like, and I've been promoting team. The fact that you're asking me this question about what I've learned, I have learned to be even more resolute against this regime. I've learned that. I want to say to teachers, on that ballot paper, you're going to see the various positions. So you'll have president, you have two names there. Look for Vanessa Kissoon, put your X right there. For first vice president, you're going to see two names. Look for Lesmine Collins, put your tick there. For second vice president, you're going to see two names. Put your tick to one of those two names. Then you're going to see the position of General Secretary. You know where you have to put that. Coretta McDonald.
Vote Vanessa Kissoon for President of the Guyana Teachers Union and Coretta McDonald for General Secretary.
You're very much welcome back to Politics 101. I stand behind those two ladies, and I want you to stand there. And whether you are a teacher or not, a family as teacher, you all call them and tell them vote for those two women, because the question of power is on the line, not the union hall, in our classrooms, wherever. Vote for Coretta McDonald, Vanessa Kissoon, and their team. Let me bring in my guest tonight, the bad boys, as they've been labeled by those who believe that they have the power to define who we are. Brothers, come on in. Richard Burke, Mark Benshaw, Apostle, Nigel London, and Kidaki Amsterdam. Brothers, welcome to Politics 101 tonight. We have some heat going on here. And we have got some heat going on here tonight. Richard, we start with you because you're one of the persons that wrote the story. Talk to us about how this got broken and how you managed to come upon it.
Well, thank you for having me. Good night, everybody. It's good to see all of you. Apostle London, good night. The first time I've been on a program with you. A source contacted me about this incident and alerted me to the fact that this young man had allegedly spat on the policewoman, called her a monkey, and chased her out of her yard. And that she had reported the matter immediately to her supervisor, her sergeant, her corporal, and she left the location. She called in and she did everything by the book, according to police procedure. And then she left the location. She walked out. When she walked out, the young man followed her. You know, she was in a business establishment, well, in front of a business establishment opposite the house. He came behind her and told her she couldn't be in anywhere in the vicinity there in front of their homes, and she must move. And she moved, and she went to, I guess, the operations headquarters of the Special Constabulary of the Guyana Police Force, where later her sergeant brought her back, right? You're abused by somebody and they bring you back. Go back right then. So they brought her back. And the next day, I understand that she spoke to the leadership of her command and nothing happened. And so I understand that she started to talk to colleagues about her incident and her family members. And it was somewhere between her family members and her colleagues, I got this information. Now, I made sure that I did my due diligence, that that's what we do here at CGID. I did my due diligence. I spoke with police officers. I spoke with senior police officers who said to me, you should condemn this because nothing is going to happen. And that's what I did. Now, when we put this information out at first, the police command live on my page, my social media pages. I guess they're monitoring it for whatever purpose. But immediately, I understand, they called her like, why went to Richard Burke? We're not going to investigate this matter because you know that we have problems with that man. This is the leadership of Guyana Police Force. And so they did nothing, even though this young lady kept saying how, and of course I'm getting this information from sources, but credible sources with the direct information. Even though she said that she was traumatized, whatever it is, she's scared. This man had pulled gun twice. 2 police officers have expressed that he pulled a gun at them. One female black. And so she was scared that he was going to do that to her, but they took her back there. And when she was told that if you follow up this story, you're going to lose your job because you know how these people are. They're in power and you can't go up against them. And so she retained an attorney. And as you noticed, an attorney at law, UC Anderson, wrote to this young man and with a reaction protocol letter, which is a procedure in the law that you have to go through before you file a lawsuit in Guyana's jurisprudence. So, and my understanding is that no official response to the letter has been made, but people have been making phone calls. But what is most disturbing to me is the fact that the Guyana police force has flatly refused to arrest this young man. And I'm glad you asked that question. You think a black attorney, Dr. Hinds, can spit on an East Indian woman, a police officer at that, and get away with it? Now, my understanding is that the disturbance caused police to react that night. Police officers from the Alberton police station responded. And when they realized who it was, they just talked to them and left. And on to this day, even though she went back, she gave a statement to the police command that requested it. She went and made an official report of assault at the Alberton police station. Nothing has happened. And that is because the East Indian elitists in Guyana, as you rightly said, control the black folks, the clowns, the puppet, like Clifford Hickens, in the police force. And I shudder to think, I was with a colleague today, a friend of mine, who's a judge. And I was showing her a report, a TV newscast report on this incident, right? And she said that she didn't want to hear it anymore because she can't believe that it's happening in 2022. And she asked me plain, why haven't you gotten on to the State Department for them to cut off funding to the Guyana Police Force and cancel any projects that the United States government is funding? I said, well, I have to talk to our members of Congress and talk to the White administration.
To get to that kind of work later on, let me bring in Mark Bishop. He has some seniority here in the sense that he himself has been a victim of that kind of behavior. He has been railing against that kind of behavior now for decades. Mark, again, we have to deal with this question of anti-Black racism, not from isolated places like Philippi or Buxton or any of those places, but from the perch of our power structure. Talk to me.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Hinds, and thanks for that introduction that you made earlier. Good night to fellow panelists. And I guess tonight is going to be not fiery from my part, because I noticed that my good friend Adam Harris is not on. So having said that, I just want to thank you much for that. And Burke mentioned earlier, Rickford mentioned earlier that the police hierarchy monitors his page. I just want to say that they monitor all of the pages on social media. And Dr. Hinds, as you would know, I mean, that's what they waste taxpayers' money by doing, by monitoring what we're doing. And Dr. Hinds, you will remember the days, the dark days under the PPP, when they had special branch, 3-4 special branch officers attached to us to follow us 24/7, to spy on us and to see what it is that we're doing. And what they have done, they have expanded that sort of so-called intelligence, illegal intelligence, to spy on some of us who reside in the United States of America. I think Rickford had mentioned that a couple of weeks ago, brought it to the attention of members of the public. We know of a case that is currently engaging law enforcement officers in the U.S. Concerning a Chinese intelligence officers who are spying on Chinese dissidents in the United States. It is illegal. It is a crime. And so those who are engaged in that sort of illegal practice out in Guyana, and those stooges in the Guyana police force, they should be placed on notice. You did speak in terms of the racial hostility and the racism in Guyana. Mr. Burke spoke about this allegation that is leveled against a police officer. And it is not surprising to me that members, and maybe all members of the Guyana police force, sit and accept this sort of behavior, allegations or not. It reminds me back in 1943 in Harlem, when white police officers, I think, shot and killed a black soldier out there in Harlem. And guess what happened? All of the police officers, the black police officers, put their guns down and protested against that form of brutality and racism, economic injustices, racial injustices, and all forms of injustices. I believe that the time has come for members of the Guyana Police Force to take a page out of those black officers out in Harlem back in 1943 who took a stand on behalf of the people who were being brutalized.
London, let me bring you in. Apostle, what does this latest incident, these latest allegations, what do they tell us about the Guyana that we live in today? Apostle London. Is Apostle London? Yes.
Greetings
Yes,
and shalom
yes,
to you all.
yes.
I've heard the question.
Yes, go ahead.
I must say that at this forum and in these types of discussions, I'm always cautious about my language. I have said shalom. I refuse to utilize the Caucasian thought concept of greeting, because we have to address what has happened, as you so aptly put it earlier, to us as a people. And I speak here to those of African descent. I'm even cautious by using the term black people, because that term in itself was used in this matter, allegedly, in a derogatory sense. This case has caused me to be extremely, as is becoming often frequent, extremely upset to know that an allegation can be made. And of course, according to the Human Rights Declaration, the UN Declaration, you have a right to be proven guilty, or you're innocent until that case. But for those who want to posit that argument, though it's plausible, if my daughter comes to tell me that a man has just raped her, would I be quiet until something is done? Or would I not behave as though the mere fact that she said it is enough to trigger from me, her father, a response, a confrontation, a challenge to the person, a passionate plea, or maybe a very aggressive one to those in law enforcement to say, you have to find this man, you have to bring him to answer the question, or I should do something about it. And that, Dr. Hunt, has caused me great grief to see that members of the Guyana Police Force, members of the wider society, women in our nation, are behaving as if this report is something to just be treated casually for as long as possible until somebody decides to act. This is severely concerning. More than anything else, the fact that the young lady said that she was spat upon. I believe, Dr. Hinds and panelists, that of course I serve Yahweh and I don't want to be religious in this matter here, but I'm saying for a reason. There's a reason why I left Georgetown maybe 2 years ago. It has to be, because if I were still living in the city, I'm on the ground by now, because I kind of see myself in the vicinity of such events and just sitting back, allow these things to happen and not approach certain entities to say, you have to give account. There is no way that a female in this nation should be raising such a report against someone of neighboring things, and we just say, well, okay, then let's see what happens. What is supposed to happen is by now, he should be brought before the Guyana Police Force. He should be made to answer. He should be made to give an account. And the wider society should have stepped up to this day to say, until he is charged, we shall not sit back. I am so sad that it seems as if with every passing day, the African and those of African descent are eager to receive the brunt of disrespect in the name of eating or surviving.
You have been in the forefront in the last couple of years in dealing frontally with the question of anti-Black racism. Does it surprise you that in the midst of all that is happening, that this young man is certainly not afraid to engage in that kind of behavior that he's alleged to have been involved in, that he's not afraid to engage in that kind of behavior? Does it surprise you? Kadaki answer them? Is Kadaki with us, Mr. Operator? Apparently, Kadaki is not with us. Let me go back to Rickford Burke. Rickford, I want you to come in here, and I want you to really speak to this question. Speak to this question of racism in Guyana from the context of the safety of Black people. Speak to the question about the safety about Black people as it has to do with racism. Go ahead.
I'm going to record. You're operating on the park here.
Yeah, I'll come back to you, my brother. Rickford, go ahead.
I didn't hear the last part of the question, Dr. Hinds.
No, I'm asking you to speak to the question of anti-Black racism and the physical safety of Black people in Guyana.
Well, I think that to the extent that there has been anti-Black racism unchecked in Guyana, is because we allow it to happen. What has happened is that we have Black political representatives who are lazy, and a Black population that feels intimidated. A Black population that accepts what you said, that there's some African Guyanese that the PPP uses to attack the Black population. And in most cases, those people have a problem with Black people. And when you have people like Mark Phillips, Onish Waldron, and Joe Hamilton, and Juan Jill, who's in a class by himself, encouraging or being complicit with racism, then you get nowhere. But the main thing is the population. And I've always said to Black people in Guyana that look at what happens here in America. Mark just spoke about the incident in Harlem. But look at what happened with George Floyd. Everybody came out, Black, white, whatever it is. But mainly Black people, we will have to start standing up to racists. And these people in Guyana that practice racism in the PPP, it's innate, it's congenital. And for those who aren't born that way, they are learned, it's learned, they're taught it, and they practice it, they see it, and they see that their elders and leaders get away with it. There's no question about that. And so what has to happen is that we as Black people have to, one, unite and stand together as one. Two, we have to confront them. This country doesn't belong to Bar Jabir or whatever it is. It belongs to everybody. And the fact that you have Bar Jabir and Orfani and these guys preaching this thing, that here, listen, if you're not with the PPP, if you're not East Indian, you can't get business, you can't get job, who the hell is these people, right? But we accept it. We accept it, and so they practice it. And you know, for instance, the USCID just put out a report calling for joint management of the country's resources. Robin Singh, who was Bart Jabbil's advisor or whatever it is, he put out a letter disagreeing with that. So what is the disagreement? That these resources only don't belong to everybody, belong to only East Indian people from the PPP? What? We said nothing. And I think nobody said anything in the leadership of Guyana or in the opposition. They allowed something like that to go. And so over time, Guyana has been conditioned, Guyanese. It's a part of our culture that Black people are abused, and we just accept it because people like David Granger allowed it to happen. People, the former opposition leader, they allowed it to happen. So now is a time when we have to raise up a new generation of leaders who are resolute, who are determined to fight racism and don't be afraid. We have to rise up against the racism.
And we will come back to that. Let me bring in Kadaki for the first time. Kadaki, I put two questions to you. as you move around Guyana and as you speak to Guyanese, is this latest incident an isolated incident, or is it something that is normative, is becoming normative in Guyana? That's one. And second, do you think we have reached the point in Guyana where Black people have to be fearful for their safety? You've got to turn on your. We're not hearing you. We're not hearing you.
Good evening again. Thank you for having me. Viewers, good evening. I'll start where you started when I couldn't get it. I'm not surprised that the incident involving Nirvan Singh and this young Black policewoman happened. It was bound to happen. As a matter of fact, it is my firm belief that it has been happening, but it has not been publicized. Taking the same Singh's family, there are lots of allegations out there that suggest that Carl Singh is also abusive to the staff. In the world of work, there are lots of allegations out there that suggest Roshan Khan is abusive to his staff, who are predominantly Black.
These are, of course, allegations because,
like I said, there are allegations.
those things to be
There are allegations.
There are allegations, right?
There are lots of allegations.
Right, but we don't know them to be true. I wanted to know what's happening in the larger society. Is it that these things, this anti-Black racism is happening there in Buxton, it's happening there in Annandale, it's happening there on the ground? You are there. Is it that what we see happening to this young lady is representative of something that's going on in the wider society?
I'm detailing the instances of allegations.
Yeah, but let's stay away from people's names.
Sometimes I can understand that.
Yes, I don't have money to give to people for libel. So let's stick to the issue.
Where the big Indian merchants operate on Regent Street, there are lots of allegations of young Black folks being treated badly when they're employed and being discriminated against for employment. Right? And so I am saying, I pointed out all of these instances to say that this kind of abuse of Black people has become normal. It is present across the country. It is present. Some people do it, as we like to say, on the down low. But the likes of Nirvan Singh, with their financial and other resources, have been emboldened to do it openly. And they've been emboldened because the system turns a blind eye on it. Those who are tasked with protecting and serving the society, including Black folks, are all indebted, or they feel they are indebted to the rich and powerful, and those who have connections to the political power, and so they do nothing about it. And so the likes of Nirvan Singh are simply emboldened, and so they're coming out. They're coming out and perpetrating these acts openly. So yes, it is becoming a norm in society. And the fact that it is becoming a norm, Black people have to be very fearful for their safety. You have to be very fearful. The question is, why was it allowed to become a norm, or why it has become a norm? Because Black people are seen as having no representative. As a village boy, I know that nobody dare mess with me, the last child out of 11, because my 8 brothers, my 7 brothers will come down the road looking for them. Blacks in this society currently appear to have no representative, because the very people they put their trust and fighting for representation for the greater part are themselves turning a blind eye on these incidents.
Mention, am I out of place when I say that Black people must be equally responsible for what is happening in terms of anti-Black racism in Guyana?
I think you are correct. There's nothing wrong with that, and a lot of our energy spent fighting each other as well, and destroying each other, breaking our leaders down. We keep this blaming our leaders when things don't go our way. We become emotional. We tend to throw them under the bus. We tend to disrespect them. And we spend a lot of time and our energies on things of that nature. And when those who don't like us see that we're fighting amongst ourselves, whether it's against Hoyt, whether it's against Corbyn, whether it's against Granger, we tend to be very impatient at times in terms of having change. And when things don't go how we think they should go, then we tend to want to throw and disrespect all of our leaders. This is not to say, and the same they did with Burnham as well. The same they did. And so we got to, have a lot of introspections and go back to the table, discuss how is it that we as a people could move forward. We spend a lot of our time, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about injustices and allegations of racism and so forth. And whilst we talk about these things and allegations of a policewoman being spat in her face and derogatory racial remarks hauled against her, and these manner of things, the other side seem to be getting richer and richer and building themselves economically in other ways. And then they sit and they laugh at us and say, look what we're doing. In the case with the allegations leveled against that female cop, it is not surprising that even members of the Guyana police force are not speaking out. They want people to go out there and bell the cat for them. They never bell the cat. They never speak out against whenever an injustice meted out against them. They're afraid. They want others to bell the cat. When injustice is meted out to citizens, they quickly jump and do the bidding of the corrupt political masters of the day against those who stand up against an oppressive system. Dr. Hinds, you've been there, you've witnessed it. I've witnessed it dozens of times, and police officers don't give a damn. Whenever they have to carry out illegal political instructions against their own, place us in lockups, in jails, brutalize us with pellet bullets, brutalize our women. Some of them get paid to be part of the phantom squad and killing squads, to kill each other, to kill members of the society. And so I say all of this to say that a lot of our energies are caught up with these sort of things. And then we oftentimes wonder why they don't like us. They get this impression that we as a people don't like ourselves. And we say all sorts of disparaging things against each other. We don't support each other. We tend to destroy each other's business, each other's lives. All manner of things we do to each other. I recall, Dr. Hinds, I recall we were protesting in front of then Minister of Public Service, Dr. Jennifer Westford. We may disagree with her politics and everything, but Freddie Kissoon hauled the most disparaging and hurtful things towards that woman. And later on, I did some introspections, and I said if it was an Indian woman, an Indo-Guyanese woman, Freddie Kissoon would never have done that. But yet a lot of us who were there, we never pulled Freddie up. We never told him that it was wrong. We enjoyed it. I never forget that. And so we have to do some serious introspections as a people. if we want others to respect us. Otherwise, our kids, our grandkids, our grandkids will sit on these sort of forums and continue with the same utterances, continue to be labeled as bad boys. And I reject that label coming from a pack of political criminals and hooligans in society who are part of an illegal and rigged regime. I reject that.
Mark, your point about us and the way we deal with our leaders, I think it's well taken. As one engaged in holding leaders accountable in an ethnic environment, a racial environment, one has to be careful that those things do not come back to work against us. But don't you think that our leaders themselves have played games with the issue of race? And in effect, they themselves are a contributory factor to us being left exposed from a racial standpoint.
I think you are to some extent correct, because our leaders, and if we say our leaders, I would want to say African Guyanese leaders.
Yes, that's what
all want to. They're forced. Yeah, thank you. They're forced to come over as it is as though they have to work overtime to prove to the nation that they are fair. Mr. Hoyt was referred to as Desmond Prasad because his own support base thought that he was leaning too much on the side of the East Indian population in Guyana. But he wasn't leaning towards the side of the East Indian population. He wanted to be fair. And all of our African leaders in Guyana want to be fair. And nothing is wrong with that, especially living in a melting pot like Guyana, where all of the citizens should be able to feel comfortable, regardless of who is the president of the country. However, when these guys are in office, the Bharat Jagdeos and the Irfan Alis and these guys, they have no shame in being brutal against mainly persons of African descent. They have no shame of encouraging economic genocide. They have no shame of racial discrimination. They have no shame of persecuting mainly persons of African descent. They have absolutely no shame. We saw what happened under President Granger. He wanted none of those sort of things. And even people who wanted to have him assassinated, even people who said some ill things against him, said, let them be pardoned. Don't worry to charge them. There were senior police officers where allegations were leveled against them of plotting with corrupt business people to overthrow him, to assassinate him, and all manner of things. He wanted to be fair. Mr. Hoyt wanted to be fair. Mr. Corbyn wanted to be fair. But do you think these hooligans, these political hooligans who are in office today want to be fair? No, they don't.
Let's bring in Nigel London and that issue. Nigel, Marcus posited that our leaders start off from the position of wanting to be fair. Some other people will say, well, they start off from the position of wanting to not necessarily be fair, but they want to get crossover folks. That they want to be politically acceptable, and in the process leave their supporters exposed to the wanton racism that happens in the society. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I see, if you're speaking to political leaders who try to see this.
Yes, I'm talking political leaders, party leaders.
Correct. Though in my view, they don't want to be fair, they want to be accepted and liked, because fairness has to be coupled with justice. You cannot be fair without being just. And if a wrong is being done, for example, someone, as Mark just mentioned, would have said they want to assassinate the president. In fairness, the law should be applied to that person. But if the president said, just let them go, that is not being fair. That's wanting to be appreciated or liked, to say, well, I'm not harsh on you, as was the case with saying, or they promised that if they win an election, they're going to imprison those who are miscreants and who would have embezzled state funds and so on. And then when I think Mingo and others were being arrested, Anna Ferguson said live that we had so much evidence, but we didn't want to appear to be attacking the PVP civic elements. Hence, we did not operate in the manner that we should have. That is bunkum. It is absolute nonsense. If you want to be fair, you have to be just. And justice is always geared towards fairness. Fairness is always coupled with justice. But I see a greater plight here in that because of the history of the Africans, in order to be accepted to some degree, has always had to dance nicely to masses too. And it still happens today. It seems as though only the African leaders, or those of African descent, have to behave in a particular manner before they are accepted by the imperialists. And this goes beyond the shores of our country. If Granger has to be determined, as he would have been, to say, I am not Fox Brown, what does that mean? You have to seek to distance yourself from your own people in order to be accepted by these individuals. And further than that, I have a serious conviction issue in relation to my having to speak nicely to some degree about those who claim to be leaders. If these men are receiving, for example, a president, almost 2 to 3 million taxpayer dollars plus benefits, a prime minister 2 million or 1 point whatever million dollars, parliamentarians receive cabinet members 1.2 or 1.2 million dollars. Why should I, as a Guyanese who has to suffer at the lower tier of society in paying taxes, why must I be, because of their ethnicity, cautious about what I say to them? They should therefore not receive a salary, and I'll be nice to them. If they're not paid these exorbitant sums of money and driving in the Land Cruiser, Prados, and so on, then I don't have to say much to you. But if you're going to be paid as extremely well as they are, they have to face the fire. And more than that, Dr. Hinds, they're the ones who ask people to vote for them, and they should represent the people. So if you're supposed to represent and defend a person, and you fail to do that, why must I, because of my ethnicity, be cautious about what I say about you? The truth is that the PPP Civic supporters do criticize them as well, and they do speak about them because you're seeing it on social media. However, the difference is that the PPP is quick to react to those supporters and seek to appease them as quickly as possible. Conversely, those from the PNC and APNA FC have sought so quickly to say, you are against us, we're going to crush you even further. And that is the issue. It is not about how we speak about them, it's what they do to us when we speak against them. And that is a crisis that faced the Africans for decades. We are yet to free ourselves from being too soft to receive criticism. And it's just upsetting to me.
Rickford Burke, our party leaders, trying to be fair, trying to be pragmatic, trying to be accepted, and in the process throwing their own people under the bus. Where do you stand here?
I stand squarely with Pastor London. I think he hit the hammer on the head. But before I go to that, I want to come back to something you raised with Mark and Kadaki. Listen, Black leaders in Guyana do not understand power. That's the first thing. They don't strategize around power and using power, using political power to enhance the lives of their supporters and for economic empowerment of their supporters. That is why people call I work for Desmond Hoyt. Everybody knows Desmond Hoyt is my so-called father, right? But what Desmond Hoyt did not understand, and what I used to tell him, is that he has to empower Black communities. There's no way the People's National Congress should have been in power for 20-something years, and their support bases in different parts of the country aren't economically empowered. There's no way that David Grant should have been in power. And as far as I'm concerned, not much for Black people. Listen, the party, the coalition, and the PNC has to understand international politics. And this is, you have to empower your base. That's where your votes are. And once you empower your base, that's when you empower the rest of the country. But you have to strategize and conceptualize and implement public policy that benefits your base first. That's what the Republicans do. That's what the PPP is doing. The PPP empowered their base economically, politically. We don't understand that. The other thing that Pastor London said that I completely agree with is that whenever, first of all, our politicians, Black politicians, are so aloof, they don't even know themselves, right? They don't go into the community like the PPP and talk with the people, understand what the people, how the people are suffering and what they want, what their needs are, and then fashion policies and budget to suit that. They don't do that. They tell the people what they want. And the other thing is that once you criticize them, they attack you. They don't analyze and internalize and say, hey, listen, you know, many people in the PNC have a problem. If I took on the PNC, I would never support them. But I don't care. I'm a leader. I could take the attacks. What I care about are those poor people that the PNC and the coalition go to and ask for their vote, and they entrust them with their vote and ask them to represent them, and they let them down. That's where my focus is. So I don't really care. You know, the 9 PNC ministers plus the First Lady came up to New York to fight me about the Guyana independence, right? And attacked me and said all sorts of things, right? The United States government, and tell them not to support the independence celebration that I'm heading. But it got them nowhere. And I'm still supporting them because I saw it as nonsense. They missed the boat that we are representing Guyana internationally. There are no other soldiers around the world that have permission to march with uniform in the United States. Guyana is the only country. And so I was selling my country. But coming back to the point is, we don't understand economic empowerment. I don't think David Granger understood how to empower his base. I don't think the PNC understands that. They have to come up with a strategy of empowerment so that our people, Black people, their base cannot remain poor. There's no way we could have an oil and gas economy, my friends, and have this wealth gap where that Dr. Hinds just spoke about local content. Indeed, local content is only about rich Indian people. They don't give a damn about Black people. This is about East Indian empowerment. There's nothing wrong with East Indian empowerment, but equally, we must have empowerment of Black people and Amerindian people and everybody. That's what we must fight for. But the PPP has a philosophy, and that's why we're having this program, of ethnic dominance. They want to dominate everything. Black people must get nothing. Oh, the Black man support the PNC. He can't have a business in Guyana. Oh, that Black business over there support Granger. His business must shut down. Oh, the Black man buy a property, take it back. And that's what bothers me. That these people could sit down at night and say who must survive in the country and who must be killed and who the police must arrest and who they mustn't arrest. Who are these people? Barjabel is virtually a war criminal, and David Granger rehabilitated him to the point where he could have stood with the ABC ambassadors and have them support him. What nonsense is that? The man should be facing court and going to jail for the things that Barjabel did. But David Granger doesn't understand political empowerment and how to use it to make sure that there's justice, like Pastor London said. They didn't understand that. So they rehabilitated Barjabel. But Barjabel was arrested one time. You know what David Granger said? Oh, a former president must not be treated like that. Nonsense. Nonsense. The former president was head of a government that murdered Black people unconscionably, committed genocide. And the world is quiet, just like the world is quiet now when this racist East Indian attorney, the son of the chancellor, spat in the face allegedly of a Black policewoman, assaulted her, and the world is silent. Why? We have given away political power. And the PPP understands that. They realize our leaders don't represent us. And they realize that there's some Black people, you could give them money and position, and they will sell out everything, even the family. And that's who they have been using against us. So we have to get an awakening as Black people. We're not racist, but we're on attack. And this is how we fight back, by educating our people and calling upon them to rise up and fight and defeat racism. Our foreparents did it, so we have a blueprint. We know how to do it.
Jackie Amsterdam, our Black party leaders, trying to be fair, trying to be pragmatic, trying to be loved, trying to get crossover votes. Which one, or is it all of the above?
I think it's all of the above, and it results in their failure. Because let me tell you something. If you really want to be fair as a Black leader, or as a matter of fact, any political leader in this country who want to be fair when they have political power and in control of the government, they must start by addressing the plight of Black people who Jagan several years ago said are at the bottom of the social ladder. Left, right, and center, you look around this society, Black people are feeling the brunt of discrimination. Black people are feeling the brunt of the economic strain. Black people are definitely at the bottom of the social ladder. And so if a Black leader comes to power and wants to be fair, we're not saying he has to take away what the other ethnic groups have. But what he has to do is institute policies. I like to talk about affirmative action. He has to institute policies which will bring Black people out of their disadvantaged state and put them on equal par or put them on par with the other ethnicities. That is being fair. Right? That is being fair. But what we are seeing, or what we've seen over the years of most Black leaders who have gained political power in this country, is them, what people like to say, kowtowing to the other ethnicities to prove that they are not discriminatory and they don't hate the other ethnicities. I am not saying they have to discriminate them. I don't say they have to hate them. But I'm saying their policies have to be in place to bring Blacks to an equal standing with them. And so when they continue to want to prove that they can be nice, they can be fair to the other ethnicity, they're doing it at the disadvantage of Blacks. And so by doing that, they are further putting us under the pressure, according to the man in the street, putting us under the pressure. Because the policies are further empowering and enriching the other ethnicities, while Blacks are left to struggle. Right? Look at all the policies of, not all, a lot of the policies of Desmond Ike. Anybody who wants to really analyze the Desmond Ike, for example, will tell you that Desmond Ike's policies were responsible for a lot. As a matter of fact, perhaps was responsible for Indian businessmen controlling the quantity of wealth and resources that they control in this country. It has not worked for Black people. Many people will tell you that, I think they will say 30%, right? Got a very big break on the Desmond Ike. And there are lots of other places that can be named. And likewise, look at the leadership of David Granger not so long ago. The majority of Granger's policies to bring people out of poverty were implemented in the interior region. And so yes, in this quest to be fair, in this quest to be liked, in this quest to win crossover votes, Black leaders have failed Black people miserably. And they are main contributors to this problem that we have.
Mark Bishop, as we ponder this latest incident, can Guyana as a country afford to ignore the question of race as a clear and present danger in our country? Let me repeat that question. Can Guyana as a whole continue to ignore race as a clear and present danger in our country?
The question of race has always been a danger, even way before I was born. It's how do we address it? Economic equality across the board is what is needed and what should be discussed. I take a slightly different approach as it pertains to our African leaders in the country. I think Mr. Amsterdam said that they have failed us I don't necessarily blame all African leaders in the country, political leaders, of having failed us. We have to take at least some responsibility for that, right? I recall as a little boy during Bornham days hearing the big guys in the village talking about, uh, Bornham couldn't do this and Bornham didn't do that for them and all manner of things. And I also heard that Mr. Bornham, as president, was disappointed in the reaction of the Black support base. I don't know how accurate that is, but that is what I heard too. And I'm saying that we should also accept responsibility and not just put all of the responsibilities on the doorstep of our leaders. I recall in the early 90s when I moved around some parts of New York City with Mr. Hoyt. I took him to meetings in Brooklyn, in basements. And after Mr. Hoyt left, there were those same guys, some of whom now claim that they're YSM members, they're big PNC members and all these things. They used to argue and say to me, Mark, why you brought this man down in this basement? Why you brought this man on 49th Street by Georgetown Food Market or John Blue Real Estate or wherever? This man didn't do nothing for Black people. We don't want to see this man. And I was like, wow. And then after Mr. Hoyt, then you had Mr. Corbyn. Our people started to complain again. And then we're hearing the same thing about Mr. Granger now, the same complaints and complaints. And we are hearing a little bit of that now against Mr. Aubrey Norton. At some point in time, it has got to stop. And we just can't put all the blame on our leaders or African leaders. It cannot happen. And some will run away with this idea that David Otter Granger and maybe other political leaders of the PNCR or even president have not done anything for Africans. But let me remind those who would jump on the pulpit and try to blame David Granger for every single thing. It is unfair because here's a man who took over a coalition, had to manage other political parties with snakes in it and Judases in it. And this is not pointing any fingers at the WPA because I leave them out of that, right? We know who are the Judases and the snakes that voted against one of the best and fairest governments that we have seen in almost 25 to 30 years in Guyana. It wasn't easy to manage a coalition. It wasn't easy to repair a country that was damaged, 23 years of damage by a dictatorship, by oppressors like Jack Day and others. It wasn't easy to do that. But you know what? Our people hardly have patience. And so we're quick to throw our leaders under the bus and destroy them just like that, as quickly as possible. And it's unfair. This is not to say, Dr. Hinds and the listeners, that Mr. Granger or any other political leader haven't made mistakes. They have made their mistakes, yes. But I think it's unfair for us to destroy them just like that. And
Apostle London, let me get you in here. Can our country afford to keep the question of race, especially anti-Black racism, off the national agenda much longer?
We cannot and we should not, because the likes of Prima, for example, when we had to hear issue the other day, she said it, that the rule that doesn't exist in mainstream education, she said it may have had roots in a colonial era, and it is discriminatory in nature because it targets specifically one group of people. Now, if Priya could say something of that nature, and she also said that it warrants a national discussion, it tells me that even if you were to say just for political points, she understands that it is a serious matter. I have been seeking for quite a while for us to have this discussion. I can even sense within me that some persons are uncomfortable because we're speaking so directly towards one group of people. And I'm even more bothered about the fact that African descendants are uncomfortable hearing about themselves. And they would shy away from such a conversation because they don't want to be labeled as racist. There is cause for us to understand that unless we have a serious discussion, a national discussion about the plight that faces the African descendant, we shall go nowhere. If at the United Nations level, they took the time to devote 1 decade, 10 years to African descendants to say we've suffered for so many years that we must now begin to have international conversations about descendants of Africans. Why is it that Guyana is so cautious about having a national conversation? I am not racist if I love myself. I'm not racist if I love fellow Africans. I'm racist if I hate another ethnic group because they're not like me. But we have the right to have a discussion about the economic disparity, about the fact that Africans, even in the banking system, are not given a fair shake in reference to what we have access to. We are seeing on a continuous basis that the culture now is about class in our society. And because the Africans have been so delayed in economic progress, they are yet to attain that stature that gives them the right to sit at certain tables to speak. We must have this conversation. We must have a conversation about why so many African young men are in the prisons in Guyana, and why some other people can pick up a phone and call a political leader of Eastern ethnicity, whatever it is, and say, listen, I'm in trouble, and they get off. These conversations are warranted, Dr. Hinds, and the longer we take to have them, the worse shall be the outcome when we decide to do it.
Kanaki Amsterdam, is there time, just as we're talking about the national development strategy, and we're talking about local content and all these big policy, is it time that we begin to talk about race, especially anti-Black racism, as a national problem? As I said, a clear and present danger.
Definitely. The time is now. The time is long gone. This discussion should have been had yesterday. If we're talking about national development policy, the development of every ethnic group in a society ought to be part of that policy. And so the ethnic disparities must form a part of that discussion. If we're talking about local content policy, when you look at local content policy, who is benefiting right now from local content? One ethnic group controls perhaps 90% of the wealth in this country. And so who will benefit from local content? If local content right now is focused on who benefits from the oil industry, for example, oil exploration, who controls, do you know of any Black entity or individual that has stake in an oil field in this country? So yes, we have to discuss the issue of race and ethnicity when we're talking about local content and we're talking about national development strategy. Because the reality is, when you finish having all of that discussion and you feel to discuss the problem of race and the imbalance in this society, all those who benefit from the local content, except the Blacks who are not benefiting, will certainly be at risk. Because when they have not find themselves in a corner, they are going to do what is necessary to either balance the playing field or claim their own substance.
And that's the voice of Kanaki Amsterdam, political commentator, host of the morning program, Bostonian Morning Time. We're going to take a short break. Have a plug in there for our sisters who are running to head the Guyana Teachers Union, and then come back for some wrapping up and closing thoughts from our panel.
It is time for change in the Guyana Teachers Union, and 2 candidates, Vanessa Kissoon and Coretta McDonald, are running for President and General Secretary respectively. Listen, as they tell us why teachers across the country should vote for them in the election.
You're running for president of the Guyana Teachers Union. Why are you running?
I believe that it is time that the Guyana Teachers Union and teachers get the type of representation that they deserve. I believe that it is time that teachers be respected. And I honestly believe, Dr. Hinds, that I am the person to take the Guyana Teachers Union and the teachers of this beloved country forward and into the future.
What have you learned about your stint as General Secretary that makes you want to continue?
Coretta McDonald is a part of a team. And I like, and I've been promoting team. The fact that you're asking me this question about what I've learned, I have learned to be even more resolute against this regime. I've learned that. I want to say to teachers, on that ballot paper, you're going to see the various positions. So you'll have president, you have 2 names there. Look for Vanessa Kissoon, put your X right there. For first vice president, you're going to see 2 names. Look for Lesmine Collins, put your tick there. For second vice president, you're going to see 2 names, put your tick to one of those 2 names. Then you're going to see the position of general secretary. You know where you have to put that, Coretta McDonald.
Vote Vanessa Kissoon for President of the Guyana Teachers Union and Coretta McDonald for General Secretary.
Rickford Burke, in 1 minute, what to do tomorrow about this latest incident? 1 minute, what to do tomorrow?
Well, I think police officers should black police officers and all other police officers who believe in justice should report sick or stop going to work or something. There needs to be some sort of industrial action in the police force to make sure that there is justice in this case and that this man who assaulted a police officer is held to account. Police officers should also understand that if a rich East Indian man or person commit a crime against you, nothing will happen. Guyanese of African descent should understand if a rich East Indian person under this administration commit a crime against you or multiple crimes against you, nothing is going to happen. You might have to take justice into your own hand. That's something I want people to start to understand. And also, let me finally say this. We need a program for black empowerment in Guyana. For instance, in New York, or in many countries in the United States, they passed a law to make sure that women and black contractors are given some sort of special preference in the procurement system. And that's because of racism. And it's something Kadefki Amsterdam spoke about. It's a form of affirmative action. And that's because we are so disadvantaged. We're so late to economic advancement that we have to put some measures in place to mitigate this massive wealth gap and the continued empowerment of black people, impoverishment of black people. We need that in Guyana. So I want everybody in Guyana to join me to ensure that we fight for laws now that empower black people, whether it's in the procurement system, whether it's in business, whether it's in the school system, whatever it is. We need affirmative action in Guyana.
Pastor London, what do we do tomorrow? Pastor London?
But we should do what we should have been doing all along, which is that we should be on the streets of this country. We should, by all means, cause it to be a shutdown of affairs or normal affairs in this nation. It cannot continue that way. I must plead to all Guyanese, appeal to you. This is time for you to be awake and alert. If you fail to act, you shall regret this and not do this in the future. We must act with strength and unity. And I thank you very much for the opportunity. The panelists, I am certainly grateful for sharing this platform with you all. And to those who are monitoring me and others, good night.
Kidaki, we wake up tomorrow, what to do?
Wake up tomorrow and shut down the capital city. Because the capital city is the seat of government. The capital city is the seat of the police high command. The capital city is where the enablers on a daily basis turn their blind eyes to the abuses being meted out to a certain section of the society. Wake up tomorrow and flood the streets in front of the office of Labor and sing and draw attention to the world that is where the racist resides. Turn up in front of Ivleri and draw attention to the police hierarchy that is failing to arrest this racist and charge him for his racial hostility. The me tell you all something. I don't know if any of you have seen. Higgins is officially the Commissioner of Police acting today. And the changes have been made already in the hierarchy of the Guyana Police Force. They got one total black man there named Errol Watts. And those who know Watts will know that he's a PPP lackey. So the entire hierarchy of the Guyana Police Force currently are enablers of the PPP and those who are close to the PPP. And unless people send a strong message, a very strong message, this kind of abuse, the discrimination, the disrespect will simply get worse. And so wake up tomorrow morning and go there and say, not a day more.
Bishop, you have the last word. What to do tomorrow?
Well, once we're spared with life, we ought to be thankful. But it is more than just hitting the streets. It is more than just protesting. It is having a national discussion on the welfare of African Guyanese throughout Guyana, and to do some deep introspections, and to at least it will move us away from the complaining tone and the attitude. It is not to say that we shouldn't complain. We should, but we should go beyond that. We should seek to, unify our communities and to support not just our own, but to support those who support our interest, to support those who respect us. Take, for example, we hit the streets and then what? We're back to disrespecting each other. We're back with the disunity. We're back with dashing our leaders and insulting them and all manner of things. It's not going to get us anywhere, because when the political opponents see us behaving like that, guess what? They'll have no respect for us, right? We talk about a black bank. We've had one that's called Globe Trust. It went under the bridge, so to speak. It's done with. We have a newspaper that is owned by a bunch of brothers, African brothers, that is not getting the support from the black business community, from the black community. We have even my own radio station. We just don't get that support from our people. We are way too divided. And unless we solve that problem, like I've said, my kids, my grandkids, yours, all of ours are going to sit here 25, 50 years from now talking the same thing over and over. We need to get back to the table and do some serious introspections. Jumping on the streets tomorrow is just not going to solve the problem. And let me quickly say, Dr. Hinds, that I do believe it's time for new leadership of the Guyana Teachers Union. New leadership. I believe that as president of that union, Ms. Vanessa Kissoon will fight for the rights of all teachers, irrespective of their ethnicity. And that is what's needed at this point in time. We do not need unions, whether it's the Guyana Teachers Union, that they have leaders that are pandering to oppressors and collecting crumbs and feel that that is okay. Vanessa Kissoon will make a heck of a good president of the Guyana Teachers Union. Good luck, Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Brother Mark. And I want to just endorse what Mark has said. The Village Voice, which is a new newspaper that, of course, is struggling to get from the business community. I want to ask you here, Politics 101 family, please go to the Village Voice website and make a small contribution, whether it's $5, $10, $20. Please go now to the Village Voice website and make a small contribution so that we can keep that news outlet, which is highlighting and issues such as the ones we're talking about tonight. Go to the Village Voice website right now and make a small contribution to keep that newspaper online and on the stands in Guyana. I have more to say about that tomorrow night. And I want to join my brothers on what to do tomorrow. Quite apart from going and make a contribution to Village Voice, I want you to continue to do, which I've always believed is very effective, undermine this government. It's a government that has worked against your interests, that has undermined your interests, that has undermined everything that you believe in. And so therefore you in turn should undermine the government. You do so in the cover of your anonymous condition. You do so in an anonymous way. You do so when no one is watching. Undermine the government. Undermine the government. Wherever you get the opportunity, do it in your silent way. And I don't have to describe to you. You are intelligent human beings. So go to the Village Voice website, make a small donation, and when you wake up tomorrow, start a new of undermining. Good night. See you all tomorrow night.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't